Welcome back to Rewitched, a charmed 1998 rewatch podcast. Join us on our journey as we recap, examine, and critique the series episode by episode from the beginning.
We'll be keeping our podcast spoiler-free, so we welcome fans, new and old, to join us in watching and reflecting on one of our favorite shows. Currently, we're on Season 4.
I'm your host, Jess Sabanko.
And I'm your host, Mia Sabanko.
Now let's get into this week's episode.
This week, we're discussing Season 4, Episode 18, Bite Me. It originally aired on April 18th, 2002, and had 3.60 million viewers.
So we open in the manor, in the living room at night. Piper is being attacked by a female demon that shoots lightning from her hands and calling for Paige. Her and Phoebe orb in, and there's a bit of a fight, and Phoebe gets scratched. Then Paige kicks the demon to the floor, and the sisters do a spell and vanquish her. Piper says, "Sorry to bother you, but she was immune to my powers." And Phoebe says, "That's okay, I was just getting ready to leave work." And Piper says, "How's it going? How's the new place?" She says, "Great and great. How about you?" Piper says, "Can't complain." Paige says, "Ditto." And Phoebe says, "Well, it's good to know that we can live apart and still kick some butt if we have to, right?" So, do I want to ask about this demon with the bad manicure? And Piper says, Harpy, part of a faction. Tried to kill us to move up in the world. You know, pretty standard stuff. Want to stay for dinner? Phoebe says, "I would love to, but Cole is planning this whole romantic thing for us tonight." And she's like, "Yeah, I just thought, maybe we could talk." And Phoebe's like, "Why? Are you okay? Is everything okay?" She says, "Yeah, everything's fine. I just thought maybe we could catch up another time." And Paige asks to orb her home, and Phoebe says that Cole doesn't like orbing without calling first, unless it's an emergency. And she says that she'll call them and goes. And Paige is like, "No orbing?" And Piper's like, "Don't start with the suspicions, Paige. Cole's probably just trying to protect their privacy." And Piper walks off, and Paige says he's trying to protect something.
Yes, our girl Paige. Someone stepping in with the logical questions.
Yes. And I also just want to say if it's like their privacy he wants to protect, why can't she orbit to bring Phoebe home? Because he obviously doesn't need privacy with Phoebe if Phoebe's not there.
Yeah, what? That doesn't make any sense. Unless he's just walking around naked or something.
Cole actually became a nudist, so that's his new thing. So.
You never know. I mean, like if I had my own place with a dude, I'd probably walk around in like no clothes quite often.
That's very unusual, but
I
good for
don't
you,
think
I
that's
guess.
unusual. Like if I'm like getting out of the shower or something and I don't get dressed right away, but like no one else is home, then what does it matter? You know what I mean?
No, I get dressed right away when I get in the shower.
Yeah, you're a little different though than I am. And I think a lot of people do it like this. Whatever.
Okay, maybe I'm the outcast. Write in the comments, let us know.
Yeah, let us know if anybody else like home alone would walk around naked. I do. I don't know. It's just me. But whatever, I guess that's not very important to the story.
Yeah. Anyway, back to the
I
plot.
like how they're kind of opening up, making it seem like it's been some time that since Phoebe's moved out,
Mhm.
and they're kind of having this uncomfortableness still, like where you can tell they kind of miss each other a little bit and things are different. And you can tell Piper really misses Phoebe, and Phoebe is giving this vibe of like a little uncomfortableness, but trying to make it sound like it's a good thing. I think she kind of misses it too.
Yeah, there's this very obvious distance going on. And like for Piper, I'm getting the hint that there's something she really wants to do with Phoebe, but she doesn't want to interrupt Phoebe's new life. So she's trying to play it off like everything's fine. We'll find out what's going on with Piper in a little bit, but it's really sad to me that like Piper is downplaying her feelings to protect Phoebe's, but it totally makes sense with her character.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense for Piper. She wants to give Phoebe this experience, you know, this chance to enjoy a normal life and a life away from magic and a life with her man, knowing, and I think she just doesn't want to overstep or make her feel like, you know, she's being selfish in any way. which is like very sweet of Piper to do, but it does make me a little sad to see.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, Paige with the suspicions, like I'm with you, Paige. Things are not adding up here.
100%.
Also, if Paige orbed Phoebe there, how the fuck is Phoebe getting home?
Yeah, I was thinking that too. Like, is Paige gonna orb her to the office and grab Phoebe's car? Does Phoebe have a car
That's what I'm
now?
saying. How does Phoebe even get to work? Does she, like, last I checked, this woman does not have a car.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
Do
maybe
they have
Cole
good
drops her
public
off.
transport in there, or does she get rides from Cole? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, we don't really get any answers about this here, but plot's sake.
You know how the show could have easily solved this issue? At the beginning of the season, when Piper was like, Phoebe, do you want Prue's car? She could have said yes instead of no.
Yeah, that would have made things a lot more understandable. It would have made a lot more sense, I think.
But whatever, Phoebe walked an unknown distance home.
I guess. So then we're back at Cole and Phoebe's apartment, and Cole's on the phone, and he says, I'm just trying to protect our assets. And we kind of have him, we're kind of sitting there thinking he's talking about business, but it's about keeping the competition from killing you, as he says. And he's talking to a table full of demons and proposing that they all work together. And then a Fury smokes in and he tells her that she's late and to sit down. Then a Grimlock comes and sits down too. And Cole says, it's a new millennium. We need to work in new ways to ensure our survival. Let's face it, it's a demon eat demon world out there. Each one of you leads a faction, but that is the problem. You're too busy trying to kill each other. In the end, everyone loses. Then two of the leaders start arguing, and he says, my point exactly. Infighting has always been our undoing. I have learned from the humanity in me that the only way for us to defeat good is to work together to achieve common goals. And then one guy says, and who will decide what these goals are? You? He says, unless someone wants to challenge me. And then the elevator dings and he says, meeting adjourned. And they all teleport out and this table disappears. And then a romantic table appears and he says, hey, honey, you're home early. And she smiles.
So I have some thoughts here.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I like the way that he's like running the underworld like a business here. I know that Cole has talked about things like, demonic people like taking over businesses in the real world in order to have like financial security and stuff. So that adds up for me in terms of his character. I have a
Absolutely.
question. Is Cole, now that he's the source, a little sexist? Because why did he yell at the Fury for being late, who was a woman, but the Grimlock came in late and he was just like, that's fine.
Oh, yeah, he didn't even question the Grimlock. Like, what the hell? What's that about?
Another thought I have here. So I know that factions started forming when the old source was killed because people wanted to become source. So is that still going on even though he's the new source? Because like demons killing demons used to be illegal. We found that out. I can't remember if it was in season 3 or earlier this season, but like we knew that.
Yeah, I forgot that they weren't allowed to kill each other. There was like a strict rule against that. So I wonder why
Yeah,
they're attacking each other still. Maybe the
which
factions
maybe
are still going on. I'm sorry, go ahead.
that's what I was gonna say too. I was like, well, maybe since like he's just now establishing himself as source, like the rule hasn't been reinforced because I guess when there was no leader, there was no one to enforce that rule.
Right, until he makes his own kind of declaration of laws, then
Yeah.
maybe it's still everybody's kind of treating it like anarchy down there.
Yeah. But he's also acting like this has always been a problem. So is it like before the old source made it a rule this was a problem? Like I feel like something there needed to be clarified and it just wasn't for me.
Yeah, we didn't get a lot of information there. It felt very much like a way for him to establish that he's handling things above ground right now, which kind of makes sense for him, like for the show in order to get us to kind of have the near misses of catching him and this and that. But other than that, it didn't feel like there was any real logic behind this meeting.
Yeah. It also seems like his goal isn't just to bring together like upper level demons who have always served the source. It's to kind of like mix groups of demons, which is kind of interesting and I guess making some changes in the dynamics of the underworld.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that.
And of course, again, the 1 minute he's this evil guy, the next minute he's setting up a romantic dinner for his wife. So that kind of dichotomy of his character there.
Yeah, so easy for people to lead these double lives. Tisk tisk.
So then we have the theme. Then we're at Cole and Phoebe's apartment again, but it's morning. Cole made her an omelet, and Phoebe says, "That's sweet, honey, but I think my stomach has other plans." He says, "What's the matter?" She's like, "Headache, upset stomach. It's going around right now." He says, "So maybe you should call in sick." She says, "Well, so many relationships are in peril. What would San Francisco do without my advice column?" And he smiles and they kiss. And she says, "I want to invite my sisters over for dinner this week. Is that okay?" He says, "Well, we just moved out." She says, "Yeah, I know, but I want to show them the place. Besides, I don't want them to think they're not still part of my life." He says, "Fine, just no orbing, all right?" She says, "Already taken care of." And they hug, and he notices the scratch on her shoulder. She tells him about the harpy, and he gets upset. He's like, "You got attacked? Why didn't you tell me?" She says, "Oh, I didn't think it was that big of a deal. That's why." He says, "Well, it is to me." And he's like super angry. And then he calms down. He says, "Sorry, I'm sorry. It's just, think I deserve to know when my wife gets hurt." She says, "You're right, you do." And they kiss. And then Julie just walks right into their apartment and is like, "Excuse me, Mr. Turner, your 9 o'clock is waiting in the lobby." And Phoebe's like, "Julie, what are you doing here?" And then to Cole, "You didn't tell me she was here." He says, "We're working out of the apartment today. They're painting my office. You don't mind, do you?" She says, "No, no, of course not." And they kiss, and Julie rolls her eyes. And Phoebe tells her to make herself at home and goes. And Julie says, "Pretty little witch if you're into that sort of thing." He says, "I am. Get the leader of the Harpies. I want to explain to her the consequences of attacking my wife." And Julie shimmers out.
Wow, Phoebe's kind of like protected at all costs.
Yeah.
Like I mean, he's kind of got her back, dude. Nobody's gonna attack the wife of the source of all evil.
Yeah. And I will say there are aspects of this scene that bring me back to what we were talking about in the fifth Hallowell of like Cole as an abuser and like displaying those types of behaviors in the way like he's so angry and then like calms down. Like it's just showing that there is that like really violent side of him. And of course, like the way, as much as it is to protect Phoebe, he's like, "Get me the leader of the Harpies." Like he is not rational. He's very like violent, very quick to react, but still hiding that from Phoebe the way like an abuser will mask from the people they don't want to see the real them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the whole kind of demonic side of Cole is a little bit of a parallel to that, you know? And they show it really well because that's how it tends to be for people, you know? That's how the manipulation like happens, you know? And that's how they slowly gain control over someone's consciousness and lifestyle.
Exactly, yeah. And the way he like almost lets it slip to Phoebe and then has to cover it up really quickly so like she doesn't know that side of him.
Right, absolutely.
Also, I mean, obviously, I'm going to point out we were talking last week about how Phoebe might be pregnant. We were seeing some signs. Now she's sick. More signs? Question
Yeah,
mark.
they're definitely hinting at us here. I'm getting a little more suspicious as we go on personally.
Yeah. And also going back to like the abusive tendencies, the way he's trying to separate her from her sisters, but trying to make it look like it's not, right? Because what does an abuser do? They isolate you from the other relationships in your life so you have no one but them.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely pretty brutal to see because that's exactly how it goes in reality, and not fun to see that happen on screen or in real life.
Yeah. And the way he's like manipulating her with the like no orbing, and she's like, "Oh, like I already took care of it," like so eager to like do what he wants, which again is hinting at
To
that idea
please
of
him.
the tonic making her want to please him.
Right, when that has never been very Phoebe, you know?
Yes, definitely.
And then, of course, Julie comes in, very Julie, and
Yeah.
Phoebe's not loving that at all. You can see the
No.
little bit of jealousy there.
Yeah. Also, like, why is everyone's office always getting painted in this show?
Yeah, they can't think of another reason. Like, I've worked in offices when they're getting painted. I've never been told, like, "Oh, you have to work from home or something today." I don't know, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
Like, this
whatever.
place is willing to give this job offers him everything that he has in his life right now, and then, I don't know, can't give him, like, a temporary office while it's getting painted.
No, they can't.
How logical. So then we move to an underworld cave, and there's a bat hanging on the ceiling, and a bunch of women in red, one laying on a throne while they brush her hair and massage her, etc. And a demon who questioned Cole last night is standing there. And the queen says, "You don't really expect me to wage war on the new source without even talking to him first, do you?" And the demon says, "It's a waste of time. He'll never bring you back from exile. He's heard the stories of what you did." She says, "That was a different time and a different source." He says, "Still, it's not going to happen. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't sure of that." And a male follower says, "Then what makes working for us any better than working for him?" He says, "You ought to listen better. I don't work for anyone. We'd be equals, partners. And once the source is dead, we'd go our separate ways. So," and the queen says, "I'll let you know when I'm ready." And he shimmers out. The queen says, "I want you to offer the new source an olive branch." And the male says, "And if he refuses," says, "then Keats has a new ally, and we have a new enemy." And he walks off, and she tells the others to go as well. And everybody leaves. I'm loving this, like, girl in power sort of thing. Not sure what the situation is. It's looking pretty vampire-ish to me, but I'm living for her right now.
I agree. I think the episode takes a really long time to just flat out tell us these are vampires.
Yeah,
Like they drop some subtle things. I also like the idea of vampires in red. Like I feel like the common trope is to have them in all black. So I
yeah.
like this like change to that. And like you were saying, I like that it's a queen, right? I like the way
Mhm.
that they're operating in that way and everyone serves her.
Yeah, it's
I
definitely enjoyable to watch. I think she's a baddie here.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't necessarily like that her like right hand is a man as opposed to like one of the women, but I get why for a later plot point they did it that way.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it could be like a similar dynamic to when a man's in charge and they have a woman as their right hand, like kind of some sort of like sexual pleasing thing for her, as the queen.
Yeah.
Not that that makes it right, but like if she's interested in men and she wants a man to be right there for her to look at and at her disposal whenever, then it kind of makes sense. It would just be like a typical
Oh,
a
you know what?
typical storyline, but if the roles were reversed as
I'll
man and
give
women, you
that
know what
because
I
we
mean?
do see a lot of the reversal throughout the show, so I'll agree to that point. I
Yeah,
also, there's a lot of sex stuff we'll talk about later, but we'll get there when we get
yeah,
there.
agreed.
And then obviously, we're just setting up this idea that Keats is working with this queen and she's not really sure what team she's on. She kind of wants to talk to the source, not directly herself, but herself.
Right. She wants to explore the options before she agrees to going against the source with someone who obviously doesn't even have as much power as the source does.
Exactly. So then we're in the kitchen in the morning, and Piper's looking out the window, and Leo's putting things in the fridge. He says, "Plenty of leftovers. You probably won't have to cook anything for a week." She says, "I like to cook." He says, "Well, there's less dishes to do. And that's a good thing, right?" She says, "I guess. It's just with Phoebe and Cole gone, it's so quiet around here. Everybody I grew up with is gone." He says, "Still, we can make it noisy again with kids, people who will grow up with us. We have an extra room now, right?" She says, "Right." And they kiss. And Paige walks in and asks if she's interrupting. Leo says he actually has to go and says that there's an upsurge in demonic activity and the elders want to figure out why. Paige is pouring her coffee and she says, "Well, since that demonic activity spilled into our living room last night, I'm assuming it has something to do with us." And he says he'll let them know. and kisses Piper and says he loves her, then orbs out. And Paige asks if Piper's okay. She says, "Me? Yeah, I'm fine." She's like, "Liar. Look, I know I'm not Phoebe, but I am still your sister, and you can talk to me." She says, it's just silly. My period was late this month by a couple of days, and I guess I got my hopes up a little." She says, "That's not silly, honey. You want kids, right?" She says, "Yeah, of course. It's just that we've been trying." And Paige says, "For a couple of months." She says, "4, but who's counting?" And goes back to cleaning. And Paige says, "Oh, Piper, you're not baking cookies, you know. It's going to take some time." She says, "Yeah, I know. I guess I was just worried that, something could be wrong. Getting flung around by demons isn't exactly conducive to baby making." She says, "Okay, A, you're going to have kids. You saw that in your future. And B, I'm living proof that magic happens when white lighters and witches get together. So the sooner you stop worrying about it, the sooner I will be an aunt." And they both smile, and Piper says thanks.
It just makes me really sad to see Piper's like disappointment and emotion in this scene. I mean, you can tell that she really just wants to talk to like Phoebe, and she's feeling the loss and the quietness of having so many people gone from the house. And as much as like Paige is there and is very much her sister too, I don't think Piper's kind of taking away from that. I just think that she's feeling like, what she said, like everybody I grew up with is gone. Like it's just I feel like the last one left here.
Mhm.
And I think that's a logical feeling, at least a logical like emptiness inside.
Yeah, I think Piper is very much a caretaker, and
Mhm.
she's been taking care of Phoebe forever, you know? So having Phoebe specifically gone is hard. And then she's also going through this moment, right, where she thought she was pregnant. She's not pregnant. I don't know if her and Leo have had a discussion about this. It's a little unclear. From their conversation, I don't think that they have, just
Yeah, I
because
don't
like I
think that
feel
she
like he
told.
wouldn't have said those things about like, oh, like we'll make it noisy again if with kids, if he knew that she was upset about like just finding out that she wasn't pregnant, right?
Yeah, I'm definitely getting the vibe that Leo didn't know that this happened.
Yeah, and so we have that, and then obviously, of course, to have that little moment between them and then have the reveal that she does to Paige is really emotional, really impactful.
Mhm.
And this is a really nice moment for them as sisters where Paige is so supportive of her, and like, she's giving her that hope in all these different ways, and also like verifying that like I know that you and I don't have the same relationship that you and Phoebe have, but like I'm your sister too, and I am here for you, and you can talk to me about these things.
Yeah, I love that little moment between the two of them and Piper opening up to her. It's a very sweet moment between the two of them, and I know with Piper and Paige, things are still a little fresh, so it's definitely nice to see that she can still confide in her as well.
Yeah. And I will say, like, what Piper's going through here, I think is something like a lot of women can really relate to. And I'll talk more about it in a later scene. But I think that, I mean, like, I'll say I don't care. Like, personally, I've been there, right? Where it's like you think you might be pregnant, you like get your hopes up a little, and then you're not. And like that's really hard to go through. I haven't been in a phase where like you're married and you're specifically trying, but like I have been in a moment where like I wanted that to happen and it didn't. And I was really hurt and disappointed. And it's not a loss, but in the moment it feels like one. So like Piper's dealing with that as well as her sister being gone, which is another thing where it's not a loss like it's a death, but it's something missing from your life that you're not able to just accept super easily.
Yeah, definitely. It's a loss in a different kind of way. And that level of disappointment that, someone could feel in a situation like you just described, it's a very real and emotional thing. And a lot of people feel difficulty talking about it because one of those like, how can I like maybe I shouldn't be upset over something I didn't have, you
Yeah.
know?
Mhm.
But it doesn't take away from the hurt of I had that desire and I got let down again. So there's a lot of emotion with that, and I can totally understand where Piper's coming from in a situation like this.
Definitely. And I think it's very realistic. Like, there are a lot of couples out there who do try for a long time to get pregnant. Like, I feel like so many people think, like, you just, stop taking your birth control and the next month you'll be pregnant. But 90% of the time, that is not the way it happens. Like, it does take longer. And a lot of women and families go through this. So I like that the show is kind of bringing in that real struggle that so many people deal with into a show that, so often is about the supernatural things, but is also about family at the end of the day.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think it's really great that they're introducing that and making people kind of aware, making it a known thing in the show that this does happen.
Yeah.
So then we go back to Cole and Phoebe's apartment, and Cole and Julie are there. Julie says, "The leader of the Harpies won't be coming to see you. I'm afraid things got out of hand for her." And he says, "Nice work. What's next?" She says, "Rowan's waiting to see you. Apparently, the Queen would like in on the new alliance." And Cole says to send him in. Julie uses her powers to close all the shade and walks out. Then Rowan walks in. He's like, "Thank you for the audience. The Queen sent me to tell you." And Coles cuts him off and says, "You tell your queen that if she steps a foot inside my realm, that she'll beg me to banish her again." And he says, "Sent me to tell you that we've learned our lesson and we're willing to serve you." And he says, "No thanks. I already have enough demons betraying me." And Rowan says, "You haven't even heard our offer." He's like, "I think you should be leaving now." Then Paige orbs in behind them, and Cole stands up and says, "Paige." And Rowan turns to her, and she's like, "Oops, I just thought I'd pop in." And Rowan says, "From where?" She's like, the kitchen. I'm not interrupting anything, am I?" And Cole moves closer and says, "No, we're done here. Elevator's that way, Rowan." And he goes into the hall, and Cole says, "What the hell do you think you're doing? This is exactly why I don't want you people orbing in here." And she says, "You people? Nice." And we see that Rowan is still listening from the hall. And Cole's like, "What do you want?" And she says, "Phoebe, I think Piper needs to talk to her." He's like, "Well, you missed her, but why don't you orb on over to the newspaper? I'm sure those journalists can keep a secret." And she's like, "Just tell her I stopped by, okay? And dare I ask, why is it so dark in here in the middle of the day?" And he says, "Migraine, which you're only adding to." She says, "You know what, Cole? Just bite me." And she goes and he bites the air.
Okay. So, with that final moment, I just want to say I read an article, which I mean, this kind of spoils something, but they were initially planning for Cole and Paige to have an affair in season 5. And that doesn't happen, thank God, because that would have been the worst storyline ever. But I feel like this little moment of like quote unquote sexual tension they're trying to create there was going to be a building block to that, which thank God they did not do that because that would have been the worst idea ever.
I cannot believe that. Were they really gonna do that?
I read it. I mean, I don't know if the person who wrote this made it up, but I don't know why they would make that up.
That would be a horrendous storyline to add here.
Yeah.
How do you come back from that? What? And the kind of love that
Which is
Cole and
probably
Phoebe
why
have.
they decided not to go through with it because, like, how do you have an affair with your sister's husband and then ever have a relationship with her?
Absolutely. And the way they built up Cole and Phoebe's love, it just doesn't make sense for them to like all of a sudden have it turn to that. I don't no, horrible, horrible. I would have hated that.
Yes. But I do think that it's interesting the way when we were talking about Cole kind of like masking his evil in front of Phoebe, he's not really masking it in front of Paige anymore. Like he's just outright being a dick to her and does not
Yeah.
care.
Yeah, I think he's losing his patience for trying to act like so cordial with the family, especially because Paige is the one who's already been against him from the start. I think the source in him is just like, "Screw you, I don't really care." To like
Yeah.
protect your feelings from me or whatever, you know?
And he kind of, I think, feels like he's already won against her. Like Phoebe's out of
Yeah.
their house. He's slowly breaking these relationships. Like, he's like, I have no reason to be nice to Paige anymore. I think he might still be cordial with Piper just because he knows that Phoebe still cares about Piper's opinion, but I don't think he cares to be cordial to Paige at all because he doesn't think that she matters.
Yeah, he sees her kind of as a less of an influence on Phoebe than anybody else, I think. And it's also I can understand the whole him feeling like he's already won against her because anytime Paige has tried to bring up her suspicions, she gets shut down. So he
Yep.
feels like, screw you, like they trust me more than you, so your word means nothing. And I don't know, it's some sort of like ego boost for him, I guess.
Yeah, it's very like I can be mean to you because even if you tell somebody, they're not going to do anything about it. They're not going to believe you.
Exactly. And I hate that. It's so real though,
Hmm.
to have someone like that. And poor Paige just kind of sticks with it and knows that, like, at this point, if I say anything, it's pointless because they're not gonna. Phoebe's just gonna be mad at me for getting involved in her relationship or saying anything. Like, she takes it so personal whenever Paige is like, I just don't really trust Cole that much, you know? But, like, how can
Yeah.
you expect her to? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I also do like what Paige is doing here, which is, again, knowing that Piper wants to talk to Phoebe and trying to make that happen, right? I think that's very sweet. I think that's very sisterly of her to do.
I definitely agree. It kind of shows that she knows right now, like, the relationship between the sisters, it's a different dynamic. Piper has something with Phoebe that her and Piper don't quite have yet. And she knows that if Phoebe's what she needs right now, then as her sister, she's going to go get Phoebe for her. And I think that that's very sweet and considerate of Paige to look at it like that and less of in a taking it personal kind of way.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Mhm.
I also am wondering from the beginning of the scene where like Julie comes in and is like, "Oh, like the leader of the Harpies won't be coming." Did Julie just end her 2-year no killing streak because Cole didn't like the leader of the Harpies?
Yeah, it's possible that she did. I wonder why she did that.
Well, I think it's because she still wants to sleep with Cole and is trying to like impress him into liking her.
Yeah, that most definitely makes sense to me.
And then as far as the Cole and Rowan stuff, I mean, obviously we're getting the fact that he is not at all interested in bringing the vampires out of their banishment. And Rowan, is trying to figure something out. I mean, he stays to listen in on the conversation, right? So maybe he has something up his sleeve.
Yeah, it seems that way, like he's getting information for some sort of plan that we don't know yet.
Yes, definitely. So then we're in the hallway, and Rowan presses the elevator button, and him and Paige go in, and he's like, "Nice guy, huh?" Cole. She's like, "Are you a lawyer?" He's like, "No, why?" She's like, "Because only another lawyer would think that." He says, "No, I was being sarcastic." She says, "About being a lawyer?" He says, "No, about thinking he was a nice guy." And Paige laughs, and she's like, "Sorry." And they introduce themselves and shake hands, and she's like, "So how long have you disliked Cole?" He says, ever since I first met him." "You?" She says, pretty much just recently, ever since he married my sister." "You have any siblings?" He says, "Oh, yeah, my family's real big." She says, "Then you know what it's like to have to bite your tongue." He says, "Been there, done that." "Listen, I'd like to continue this, but we've just run out of floors. Any chance we can get together?" And she tells him to come by P3 later and gets off the elevator.
Absolutely love that. I'm shipping the little connection and vibe they got going on right here in the elevator. I can't lie.
Yeah, no, they do have a good vibe. I'm wondering if he's just playing her or like if the chemistry is like real. But I do like it. Like I'm really into this. And the whole like playing on the trope of like, oh, we hate the same person, so like maybe we can be friends. Like I really like the dynamic they set up there.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely really enjoying it too. Obviously, this must have to do with some sort of plan he might have, or at least like it's helping him build a plan. But I still think that like the chemistry between them, on some sort of level, he's enjoying it as much as she is too, you know?
Yeah, that's a fair point. And I think based on what the plan's going to end up being, their chemistry could very much be real.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So then we go back to the underworld cave, and the queen is getting a sponge bath. And she says, "You're certain of her identity." And Rowan says she's the sister of the Source's new bride. That makes her a charmed one. She says this might be our lucky day. And you said meeting with the new Source would be useless. And Keith says he refused your offer, didn't he? She says yes, but he gave us something much more valuable instead. If we can get a charmed one on our side, we can use her power to take over the underworld before the new Source can. We can destroy him and anyone else who opposes us. He says, yeah, but she's a witch. They don't change sides on a whim. And Rowan says, oh, I think I can get her to see things our way. And then he turns to the queen and says, with your permission, of course. She says, by all means, take whomever you need. And he goes, and the queen looks very pleased.
I love this scene. I like the way that he has to ask her for permission. She is such a boss bitch for that. I like the way that Keats is like, trying to be like, oh, like your plan's not gonna work. And they're like, you know nothing.
Right, like, you don't get it.
Yeah.
I definitely agree, and I like their plan and this idea of kind of changing them over to their side. However, don't you think it would also be kind of a smart plan to let them know? Like, Rowan could tell them that Cole is the Source, and that way they could defeat the Source like they were able to last time if their ultimate goal is to take Cole out as the Source. You know what I mean?
Yes, but maybe they just want to like, because then taking him out as the source, but exposing him doesn't necessarily bring them the goal they want of taking over the underworld, because then they have to battle the charmed ones still. If the charmed
Oh,
ones
yeah,
are
I
on their
guess you're
side,
right.
there's no one to kind of take them down once they take over.
Right, yeah, no, that makes sense. I guess yeah, if their goal is to kind of be up and coming, then it would make more sense to have the charmed ones on their side.
Yeah.
It's
Like
just
I get
you
what
would
you were
think that
saying, but yeah.
you would think the demons and them at some point would realize that it doesn't usually work out that way with the charmed ones.
Yeah, well, remember, evil is always prideful.
This is true. And they were banished, so maybe they don't know enough of exactly what's happened with the charmed
True.
ones.
So then we go to P3, and Piper walks over to Paige, and Leo is following behind as they walk. Piper says, your mystery man's still pulling a disappearing act? She says, I can't believe he stood me up. She's like, I'm glad I'm not dating anymore. And she says, yeah, well, I should have known better than to think I could meet a guy through Cole. She's like, Paige, I have two words for you, broken and record. If you keep this up, you're just going to end up pushing Phoebe further away. Leo says she's right. Then Phoebe walks over and is like, hi, do I still get free drinks here or do I have to pay now? Piper says, whoa, you don't look so good. Are you okay? She says, that's partly why I'm here. I thought it was just a bug and now I'm not so sure. So I'm wondering if it has something to do with, the scratch. And Paige is like, maybe you're turning into a harpy, like joking. And then gets serious and's like, oh my God, are you? And she's like, well, that was how Piper turned into the Wendigo. Or was it the Fury? And she says, I've turned into so many things I can't keep track. And Leo's like, I wouldn't worry. You can't turn into a harpy just by getting scratched. And she's like, yeah, but still, do you mind? And he goes to just like heal her in the middle of P3, and Piper's like, no.
Yeah.
And all the sisters like jokingly hit him and they like walk off.
Yeah, I remember that was a very funny funny exit scene for Leo.
I loved it because like I feel like we've made fun of so many times in the last two seasons Leo just openly using his powers. So I like that he was finally fucking called out for that.
Genuinely. But I feel like they all do it sometimes, like at least a little bit. But
Oh yeah,
Leo
definitely.
definitely especially. It was about time somebody said something. But aside from that, we're still getting kind of those hints that Phoebe, maybe it is the pregnancy thing because Leo says that she can't turn into a heartbeat just from a scratch. And aside from that, I think it's kind of pushing the plot of like, well, what happened between Rowan and Paige? Why isn't he there?
Exactly, exactly. And again, expressing kind of like more of that awkwardness between the sisters.
So then we move to the back room, and Leo heals Phoebe and asks if she feels any better. And she says, a little, I think. And Piper asks if the elders found out anything, but they didn't. And Piper invites Phoebe to dinner, and she agrees. Then Paige says, I'm not going to go. I don't want Rowan thinking I was waiting for him if he shows up this late. And Piper turns to Leo and says, "You buying?" And Leo's like, "You kidding?" And they start heading out. And Paige is like, "Hey, Phoebe, I think you should try to find a moment to talk to Piper." She's like, "Why? Is something wrong?" Paige says, "No, not really. I think she could just use your support about something. That's why I orbed over to your place this morning to talk about." And Phoebe's like, "Wait, you orbed to my place after I specifically asked you not to? Paige, what were you thinking?" And she's like, "I was just trying to help Piper." And Phoebe asks if Cole was upset, and she says, "A little, a lot." And Phoebe's like, "Great, Paige, just great." And she walks away, and Paige is like, "I was just trying to help."
So I think this scene really, especially that ending part, goes back to again that like metaphor for the abuse dynamic where like Phoebe is very scared of Cole getting upset, right? Like that's her
Right.
biggest priority is that like Paige didn't upset Cole. And then obviously we get Paige here is just trying to be a good sister and getting like beat up for it for like no reason.
I know, she was genuinely just trying to help out Piper. And I mean, they're so used to openly orbiting around each other that, like, I think Phoebe should be able to give her some leniency for a one time, like, "Okay, it was a mistake, won't happen again," or like, "I get it because I walked in on some like, on a business meeting," or so she thought, and I get where Phoebe's definitely feeling this intensity and fear because of that abuser dynamic, but yeah, I wish she would give Paige a little more leniency here.
Yeah. And I think it is going back to like what we've been talking about the last two episodes in like her personality shifts because of the potential pregnancy, right? So we have that kind of at play, which I feel like is going to be us just excusing Phoebe's behaviors all the time. And like, I apologize, but it's just the only way to really explain like this major shift in her character, right?
Yeah, I'm hoping so because in any other circumstance, it really doesn't make a lot of sense because Phoebe doesn't normally act like this.
Yeah,
You
definitely.
know, she's never been so concerned in that way. She's usually more willing to protect her sisters and speak up for people. So it definitely is a little odd that she's doing this now, unless maybe it has something to do with this baby.
Yeah, because one thing we've always known about Phoebe is like she's a very independent person. She's not a just like do whatever my man wants me to do type of person. Like it is a pretty big shift for her from how we've only seen her to the way she's been acting the last couple episodes.
Absolutely. And it's pretty much been, yeah, ever since like the marriage itself, that also put some sort of bond between the two of them for her to have married evil, obviously not knowing that that's what she did, but
Mhm.
that could also play a part in why she's acting like this as well.
Yeah, definitely. And then, I mean, in terms of earlier in the scene, the way that like Piper and Leo joke about like him paying for dinner, I thought that was really cute. I like that Piper kind of played on that. I also am interested in like, so where are they having dinner that Paige is like, I can't go because Rowan might see me and think I was waiting for him? Like, are they having dinner at P3? In which case, isn't nobody buying because Piper owns it?
Yeah, I think they are having dinner at P3, and that's why Paige said that. And I think that, the whole, like, obviously nobody was going to buy, and that's just kind of why she made that joke or
Okay.
something.
All right.
That's what I was picking up on because it wouldn't make sense why Paige would not go otherwise.
Yeah,
But it was still funny, cute little husband-wife moment there.
definitely. So then we're out in the parking lot, and Paige is headed to her car and starts hearing like these weird noises, and she starts walking faster and reaches into her bag. And then this bat flies up and bites her, and she just like falls down in the most dramatic way possible. It's actually really funny. And then a bunch more bats just like show up and start attacking, and she has like all these like bites all over her, and she's like on the ground. It's something.
It's a pretty interesting scene there. She just got absolutely mauled by bats. Pretty
Also,
pretty
her
interesting.
outfit is super cute. I didn't point it out before, but I'll say that.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. So after this, we go to the hospital, and Paige is now in a bed talking to a doctor and says, "So am I the weirdest case you've ever seen?" And he says, "I don't know. I've been working the night shift for a while now. I've seen some pretty strange things." Then her sisters and Leo come in asking if she's all right, and the doctor says that she might have bled to death if no one found her, and that she needs rabies shots. And Piper doesn't think it seems natural, and the doctor leaves. And Leo says, "Seems more natural than supernatural to me." Paige is like, "Yeah, well, I'm thinking vampires." And Phoebe says, "No, that's not possible because as far as I know, vampires attack in human form and not as a swarm of bats. Gotta be something else." And Leo says, "No, that's true. Vampires have been ostracized from the underworld for centuries. As far as I know, they're part of a whole different network now." Then the doctor comes back in with a nurse to draw blood for tests and says that Paige can go home but has to come back for a shot in the morning. And when the nurse draws Paige's blood, Phoebe faints. Little attention whore over here. No, I'm kidding.
So, first thing I want to say is I like this moment at the beginning where Paige is like, "Oh, is this like the weirdest thing you've seen?" And like obviously we know there are like demon attacks and weird things going on all the time. So I like how like the doctor has noticed, but he's like, "Oh, like night shift, like I've seen other weird things before."
Right. But, a swarm of bats in San Francisco is definitely a little weird.
Definitely. And I like how he was like, I mean, I didn't write this in the notes, but he's like, "Yeah, I've seen people who've gotten bitten by a bat before." And she's like, "Yeah, like one, not a fucking swarm."
Right, literally. Make it make sense.
But aside from that, I like the way like Paige is immediately like vampires and everyone else is like, "No, Paige."
Yeah. Don't be stupid, Paige. Hate it. Poor Paige never she always gets the runt of it?
Yeah. And also, I mean, the Phoebe fainting thing, another pregnancy hint, right? Like that's kind of what that is.
Yeah, I would say they're just kind of throwing them at us left and right here.
Yeah. So then we go to Cole and Phoebe's apartment, and Cole is pacing and he's like, "Damn it, where is she?" And Julie's like, "What about the Grimlocks?" He's like, "The Grimlocks? You think they attacked her? If they did, I'll crush their skulls with my bare hands." She's like, "And who said romance was dead? We were talking about who we could trust, remember? Grimlocks, yay or nay?" He says, "Sorry, yeah, Grimlocks are okay. Keats is the only one I don't trust." And then the phone rings and he's like, "That's got to be her." And then we're kind of between the car and the apartment on a phone call. It is Phoebe and she's calling from the car. And he asks if she's okay. And she tells him that she fainted and it wasn't a big deal. And in the car, we see that Paige is like bothered by people's headlights. And Cole is like, "Phoebe, people don't just faint for no reason." She's like, "Well, I've been pretty run down, and the doctor said I might be anemic, so he took some blood to make sure that's all it is." And he says that Leo should check the scratch, and she says that he did, and there's nothing to worry about. And she tells Cole about the bats biting Paige, and Paige is like, "I bet he's all broken up about it." And then Phoebe says, "Leo's gonna heal her when we get home. Want to meet us there?" He's like, "I am home, Phoebe. You called me." She's like, "Oh, I meant the manor. I'm sorry." And he says, "On my way." Then we go just to the apartment, and Cole hangs up, and Julie's like, "You think it was Rowan?" He says, "He must have been trying to turn her." She says, "You can't let them get a charmed one on their side. They'll be too powerful." And he's like, "Don't you think I know that? Damn it, gather the faction leaders. If the queen wants a war, she's got one." And he walks off, and she's like, "Where are you going?" He's like, "To the manor to help save Paige." And he leaves, and Julie looks upset.
This whole scene was very enjoyable to me. I mean, the whole beginning part where here we go again with Cole showing that violent side and that, like, I don't know if it's supposed to come across as concern for Phoebe when it really comes across more like obsession
Yeah.
in a way to me. And I'm not loving that because obviously aside from the supernatural aspect of it, it seems very real for them to like for an abuser to come across that way and like act like that, talk like that. It's just like, ugh, you know?
It's giving very like fatal attraction, obsessed with you in a dangerous kind of way vibes. Like, this is not the same toxic relationship they had previously. It's very clearly getting worse. He's getting more and more controlling, moving her away from her family, overreacting to him not knowing where she is for a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly it. And it becomes more stressful to watch as you go, especially seeing how like we were talking about earlier, just basically all the same things, where him hiding it and it progressively getting worse and Phoebe being slowly more and more manipulated and taking his side and not seeing what's happening underneath. all of it is just, like, really hard to watch, especially when you can see something like that happen to someone who's got such a strong, independent, mindset, character, like, Phoebe is that person, and it really is just something that can happen to anybody like that, and it's really unfortunate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, in terms of the supernatural aspects of it, I think it's showing more and more of us losing Cole and gaining the source.
Absolutely. Yeah, it doesn't feel very cold to me anymore, like, we're very close to having lost him completely.
Yeah. And like we've seen him get like angry and possessive about her safety in the past, but I think we're moving to new levels of it. And like his distrust in like her taking care of herself is something we've seen before. But
Yeah,
it just feels different here because of the way he's, instead of pushing her to be with her sisters because of that, pulling her away from them because of that.
exactly.
I also really love Paige in this scene, like the way she's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, like I bet Cole like really gives a fuck about me." Like,
Yeah, no, she cracks me up a little bit. Love that. Her
yeah,
little comedy moment in that worked for me really well.
definitely. And I mean, I feel like her like being bothered by the headlights is obviously a hint of her turning. And then, as if we weren't super aware that that was what was going to happen, we have to get that whole scene between Cole and Julie. Which I mean, the one important part was that he wants to use the factions to defeat the vampires and get them back to him.
Exactly. So then we're back at the manor in the attic, and Phoebe and Piper are looking through the book unsuccessfully, and Leo is healing Paige behind them, and then he starts making suggestions. But Paige thinks it's a waste of time and says that she's fine and to call it a night. Piper's like, Paige, if you're tired, just go to bed. We'll wake you up if we find something. So she goes, and Phoebe's like, isn't there some way you can help us narrow down the suspects? And Leah's like, with every demonic faction in town, it makes it kind of hard. And she's like, okay, so what's going on? Is there a demon convention in San Francisco or what? And Piper says, yes, there is a demonic electoral college. They've called a meeting and they're voting in a new source. And Phoebe and Leo laugh, then get serious. And Phoebe's like, you think? She's like, well, not the voting part, but maybe. I mean, there's got to be someone powerful who's bringing together all these factions, which means, and Leo says, evil may have a new leader. Then Cole walks in, and him and Phoebe hug, and she says that she's fine, and he asks about Paige. Leo says that he healed her, and Cole's like, are you sure? He's like, yeah, why? Piper's like, do you know what we're up against? And he says, bats that bite can only be one thing, vampires. And Phoebe says that they ruled them out, and he asks if she's ever seen one. She says, no, but I've read about them. Cole's like, well, I've dealt with them. If you can trust Anne Rice, you can trust me. And Piper flips the book and agrees with him. And Leo's confused about how he dealt with them since they're pariahs in the underworld. And Cole says, well, I wasn't too picky with who I dealt with. I didn't care that the source had banished them for selling him out to his enemy. And he says, why attack now? What do they want? Cole says, well, there must be a power struggle. They must be trying to take over the underworld. And Phoebe says, by killing Paige? And he says, no, by turning her into a vampire. Then everybody looks at each other and then they start calling for Paige and running to her.
I like this scene. I like the setup. I like the build up. I like the way that they're like, oh, evil must have a new leader. And then Cole just walks right in the room. I think it's really like ironic and funny that they set it up that way. I like the jokes about the demons voting in a new leader and then realizing, like, wait, that's kind of exactly what's going on. Like, they're all here because they're forming something.
Absolutely. And the whole Cole coming in here part and saying these things and like pretending like he's there for them, it sucks because it did feel very much like we had the Cole that we used to have, like
Mhm.
genuinely helping them come to conclusions.
I totally agree. And I also like the way that Leo questions him here, right? Because he's like, well, how would you have dealt with vampires if they're outcast?
Right.
And he like comes up with this excuse because, as always, Cole's quick on his feet. We also find out that the reason that the vampires were banished is because they sold out the old source to his enemies. And, the reveal that obviously they were trying to turn Paige into a vampire. Paige had to separate earlier in the scene so we could set up for next scene.
Absolutely.
So then we cut down to Paige's room and they're looking around for her and don't see her at first, but then she's hanging from the ceiling upside down and they're all like freaked out and she turns into a bat and flies out the window and they like look out after her with like these shocked expressions.
Such a like dramatic way to reveal it, but it still works for me. It was pretty cool, pretty funny.
I liked it. I thought it was really funny, really comedic. Like, I have no notes. I actually really enjoyed that reveal. I thought it was fun.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a fun reveal. I agree. So then back up in the attic, everyone's there, and Phoebe found some garlic and other supplies, and Leo says that he can get holy water. And Cole's like, you know, that stuff's only going to help you fight off the vampires. It's not going to help you change Paige back. And Piper's like, yeah, I'm working on that. According to the book, if you kill a vampire queen, then all her little vampires die with her. And he says, really interesting. They certainly don't like to spread that around. And Phoebe says, that'll kill Paige too. She says, no, not if she hasn't bitten anyone. Apparently, the transformation only takes place after blood is spilled, or in this case, sucked. Then Phoebe asks how they vanished the queen, and they see that they need the power of three. And Phoebe's like, of course. Piper says, oh, it gets worse. The vampires are immune to witchy powers. Leo says that he'll get the holy water and fill in the elders about the new source. He orbs out. And Cole's like, new source? There's a new source? And Phoebe's like, yeah, we think so. And he says, any idea who it is? And she says, no, not yet. Piper's like, let's focus on Paige. If you were undead, where would you be? And Phoebe says, cemetery. And they're about to go start checking them out. Cole says, Phoebe, I don't want you to go. She's like, what? And he says, well, it's too dangerous. What happens if you faint again, but this time in the middle of a vampire attack? And she says, baby, that's not going to happen. He says, well, how can you be sure? I don't want to lose you. She says, I don't want to lose Paige. I don't understand. Weren't you just telling us we had to save Paige? And he says, well, yeah, but that was before I had all the facts. You need the power of three. I'm sure Paige is not going to be in the rhyming mood. Piper's like, so what do you suggest? That we let her spend eternity as a vampire? And Phoebe says, she's still my sister, and that doesn't change because I happen to be sick or because I'm your wife. And she walks off, and Cole looks at Piper and then back down, and she goes too, and he flames out. Love this.
Really strong scene here. I like the setup. I like the way he's learning new information he didn't have about the vampires because evil didn't know that that's how you kill them. The use of like, blood is spilled or in this case sucked. I mean, not to be that obvious about it, but everyone knows that like vampires and like blood sucking is like a metaphor for sex. So like there's obviously like the sexual context there of like sucked and I'm not gonna we all know what it is. We're all adults listening to this podcast, hopefully, but like it's too much.
You're absolutely hysterical. You're like, I'm not gonna say it, but we all know what I mean, right? Whatever, minor little,
Yeah, we'll talk more about
minor
this
little
in a
side
later
note.
scene.
Yeah,
But then we have obviously Cole finding out that they know that there's a new source, right? But obviously playing it cool and then finding out that they have no idea who it might be. So he's like, okay, I'm in the clear. Then we have Cole overstepping here in telling Phoebe not to go. And throughout the episode and last episode, we saw her picking him. But the one thing she's still not choosing him over is Paige. So one of her sisters is always going to come first, which has to be hard for Cole because, well, especially since we're losing Cole and gaining the source, right? So that's got to be like a real, like, just kick in the face to him.
absolutely. I mean, I love that we get to see our Phoebe here, like it's still Phoebe there, and she's very much like now she's kind of picking up on this, like she's defended Cole to Paige countless times. When it comes to Paige's life, she's not going to suddenly turn her back and say, oh, just because you feel it's too dangerous, I'm not going to go. Like, that's my sister, and I have to protect her at all costs.
Yeah.
And I love that we get her kind of standing up to Cole in that way because it was much needed. And that felt like the Phoebe we all know and love?
Exactly. And especially that line she uses, like, she's still my sister, and that doesn't change because I happen to be sick or because I'm your wife. Like,
Yes.
yes.
Like, gotcha. Because that seems to be like his big thing? Like, just because I'm your wife now doesn't mean you have this big power over me anymore. Like, now?
Yeah, and I mean, this episode is about vampires, right? And when it comes to like vampires, specifically Dracula, there's this idea that they have like the thrall over the object of their affection, right? So the woman they
Hmm.
love, they like kind of have this hypnosis over her that changes and controls her. And it seems like Cole has been having a little bit of that over Phoebe since the wedding and then since the tonic, right? So we've been seeing that happen more and more, but her love for her sister overrides that thrall.
Absolutely. It 100% does. And I think that's a lot for Cole to take in, both as the source and as Cole, because he doesn't have anything like that in his life that he would put above Phoebe, where
Mm-hmm.
she does, you know? And
Yeah,
obviously, as the source, that just makes it harder for him to turn her as his queen.
exactly. And I think that's why it was really smart to include a vampire episode right here because it is such a like, kind of like
A
metaphor for
stigma about
what's
it. Yeah,
already going on. So it's like kind of adding to that
right. Definitely a
aspect.
little connection there.
Mhm. The only other thing I'll say
Yeah.
is obviously we're getting a lot of the setup of the fact that, the transformation doesn't happen until she kills someone, which I think we've seen before. Like, I think that was the same thing with the Banshee. Like, you don't fully become a Banshee until your first kill. So that's not the first time we've heard something like that. And then obviously the fact that they need the power of three, but they won't have it because Paige is turned.
Right. So kind of like there's still a chance for her, but also how are we going to get out of this one, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. So then we're at Cole and Phoebe's apartment, and the demon committee is at the table, and he flames in. He says, "The vampires are trying to convert my wife's sister, a charmed one. I'm interpreting this as an act of war against me." And Keats suggests that it's a misunderstanding. And he's like, "I don't misunderstand anything. I want the vampires exterminated, every last one of them." And the Grimlock says, "Vampires multiply too fast. We can never get them all." Cole says, "If we kill the queen, they all die." And Keats questions this, and Cole shows his source eyes at him, and he tells everyone to send their people, but that if anyone hurts Phoebe, they'll answer to him. And they all teleport out, and Keats is just sitting there for a moment. Him and Cole look at each other, and then he finally teleports out. Once everyone's gone, Julie walks over and says, "What about the other sister? Are you going to let her die with the queen? It would eliminate the charmed ones." He says, "Phoebe would be devastated, but I wouldn't be."
Dun, dun, dun.
That is the fucking source taking over because just a couple episodes, he's like, "I can't let Paige die. It would hurt Phoebe." And now he's like, "Sure, fuck Paige."
Yeah, now he's losing that care in that way, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's slowly taking over him more and more. Because before, when he didn't let Paige die, you could feel that there was a little bit of sympathy there, a little bit of humanity in him. And now it just seems like at this point we've gotten so far to the point where it's almost undetectable unless he's with Phoebe, you know?
100%. And
And even
obviously,
then it
we,
seems like so forced because as soon as she walks away, it's gone again, you know?
yeah, definitely. And I think there's two possibilities there. One, it could be that he's playing her, right? Like he wants the baby and he's kind of like, "I need Phoebe." But it also could be that the Cole within him still very much loves Phoebe and could never give up on their love, which I think is something that old Phoebe told us in The Three Faces of Phoebe. So that's kind of the way I'm going with because we did have that reveal from the future.
Yeah, you're right. We did. I like that we kind of got that backstory or like that future story that kind of keeps our hopes like a little high that maybe, it's not just a game and it doesn't become just a game. He genuinely can't seem to get rid of that love that he has for her.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think if we hadn't had that moment, I would be totally like, "Nope, he doesn't love Phoebe anymore. He doesn't care about anything anymore."
Yeah, it'd certainly be hard to tell. Like, I think we'd have our suspicions. Like, there's a chance, but also we'll never know for sure. But since we had that from future Phoebe saying, "You've never been able to kill me. You could never let go of that." Blah blah blah. Now we know.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think it's a smart plan to kind of send his little demons out to try to kill the vampires, right? Since he knows they don't
Yeah,
have the power of three, and that's what the charmed ones would need to stop him or stop them.
agreed. So then we go to the underworld cave again. and the vampire queen is feeding. And Rowan walks in and apologizes for interrupting and brings in Paige. And the queen says she's perfect. She'll fit right in. And he says, I thought you'd like her. And she says, are you hungry, my dear? And Paige says, famished. She's like, that's wonderful. Now, for your first meal, I have two savory victims in mind. The other vampires start dressing Paige in red, and she says, anything for you, my queen. The queen says, I want you to go back to your sister's Paige. Take a taste of your own blood. It'll seal your conversion and turn them as well. Then Rowan says, that's genius. With the power of three on our side, the source will be no match for us. She says, my sisters are very powerful. They won't join us willingly. I don't think I can do it alone. She says, oh, my darling, look around you. That's what families are for. And they're surrounded by vampires everywhere.
So one thing here, I mean, I'm going to keep bringing it up. We all know that vampires are a metaphor for sex. So I like the way that once Paige turns, Rose starts using this kind of like sexier, quieter, like whispery voice every time she talks. Like I like that choice. I think it's like interesting and I think it really works for the dynamic and will especially work in her next scene. I also like that she wants her to turn the sisters. The queen has this plan to build from Rowan's plan to turn one sister to turning all three. And, you know, this idea that Paige is like, oh, like they're not going to let this happen. And the idea that the vampires are a family, the way the sisters are, is interesting too.
Yeah, I think this whole scene and the whole dynamic between the vampires right now as like a family, like you said, the kind of like sexier aspect of them and how they have each other's backs similar to the way the charmed ones do. It's all there like working so well for me. Like and they're all playing it beautifully.
Yeah, definitely. So then we're in another part of the underworld, and Keats is talking to a vamp, telling him to give a message to the queen to leave town. He's like, the source is, and Cole appears and says, the source is what? And the vamp turns into a bat, and Cole vanquishes him. And he's like, where's the queen, Keats? And Keats throws an electricity ball, and Cole stops it. So then Keats says, you can vanquish me, but I'm not telling you anything. And Cole says, do you really think that vanquishing you is the worst that I can do? And he sets him on fire and he's like freaking out. And then Cole stops it and says, so let's try this again. Where's the vampire queen?
Loving this here. Cole being a little badass there. And Keats
Yeah.
for some reason still having their back to the end.
Yeah. I think because he really just doesn't want to work under Cole. Like, for whatever reason, he
Yeah,
has some
it's just
beef.
his demonic pride, his little ego.
Definitely. And then, you know, we obviously get this is Cole finding out where the vampire queen is. That's really the purpose of this scene. And obviously the fact that he knows that Keats was the one who double crossed him.
Exactly. Back at the manor, Paige walks down the stairs in a red silk outfit, and she says they're not here. And Rowan says, they must be looking for you. She says, I was hoping to get this over with. He says, just relax. You're only innocent once. She says, but I'm starving. I feel like I've been waiting for this moment my whole life. What are you smiling at? He says, I was just thinking of my first time. She says, tell me about it. He says, it's better than you can possibly imagine. Danger, excitement, that warm glow you feel afterwards, there's nothing like it. And she says, how many have you had? He says, I don't keep track. The faces all fade away. It's the taste you remember. She says, and what was I? Just fast food? And he says, oh, hardly. Just relax. Clear your mind. You are a hunter now. You have the ability to find your prey. She says, I don't understand. He says, you will. Close your eyes and focus. She opens them and knows where they are. Paige says, tell the queen to expect company. And she walks off. I love that we're getting like the whole kind of dynamic, like the chemistry between them that we were seeing earlier. And again, the little sexual references, but I don't see it as like a bad thing. I think it's like being played off very smooth and kind of like a callback to last episode where Paige gets her sensing ability and now she's doing it again, but as a vampire.
I like that. I didn't think about
Right?
that connection. In
Like,
terms of, I mean, the sexual nature of this scene. So again, vampire lore, like the vampire bite has always like in literature, in media, been a metaphor for sex. Like when you couldn't directly write or show sex on screen, like that was something that was used to symbolize it, right? So that was the whole purpose of creating vampires in fiction. And the way they play here with what is obviously like a metaphor for losing your virginity, right? This idea like, oh, you're only innocent once, and like, what
Mhm.
was your first time like, and all of this. And she's like, I've been waiting for this moment all my life, like that type of thing. Then we get a line that, because of what it's talking, like, because it's a metaphor for sex, is really gross when he says, the faces fade away, it's the taste you remember. I was like,
Not loving that.
don't love that part. Okay. And then Paige kind of being like, oh, like, did I not matter to you, right? And like, kind of giving that idea that sometimes I think comes up in fiction, and a lot in like vampire fiction, because there is this tendency for like the female protagonist to be a virgin, and then like the supernatural love interest to then sleep with her, but him to be like this super experienced, like worldly guy, right?
Right.
So for it to be like, oh, like, no, you weren't nothing to me, like you're so special, like it's playing on tropes, and like I like it. Like I like the way they do it. I think it's well written. I think it's well like paced. I think it's well acted. Like it's really well done scene. But it's, I mean, some of the dialogue's a little heavy-handed, but I do really like it.
I definitely agree. Like, it is heavy-handed for sure, but it doesn't feel, like, uncomfortably, like, you know what I mean? Weird, or when they
Yeah,
do
no,
it to,
not at
like,
all.
almost an offensive way, like, I feel like they're fitting into the tropes, like you said, pretty well, and playing this very, very smoothly. I enjoy it.
Yeah, and I think part of it is a little bit of like, how much can we get away with saying on network TV if we act like we're talking about sucking blood and not, you know,
Sucking
eating
dick.
pussy?
Yeah. You said it! I'm so proud of you. I think those words would ever come out of your mouth. We went two different directions with that, but that was really
Yeah, we
funny.
were on the, opposite
Same way.
part, but same same wavelength.
Anyways, anything else to add there?
I mean, just that obviously, like with the sensing power, she was successful in finding her sisters here.
Exactly, yeah.
So then we're at the cemetery, and Phoebe and Piper are running after a Grimlock, and he shimmers out, and Piper's like, what is going on? That's the fourth demon tonight to run away from us. And Phoebe's like, I don't know. Maybe word got out that we killed the source. She's like, the old source. And Piper thinks that they need a new plan before the sun comes up. And Phoebe starts feeling dizzy and leans against a stone and like makes a joke about the tombstones moving. And Piper's like, Phoebe, this is not funny. Maybe this is more than being just run down. Maybe you're pregnant. And Phoebe laughs and is like, that is funny. And she's like, actually, it's not so funny. I went to the drugstore, I got a test, I peed on a stick, and I anxiously awaited the results in 2 minutes. And it was negative, thankfully. And Piper says, yeah, well, mine was too. And Phoebe's like, you thought you were pregnant? She's like, for about a minute and a half. She's like, oh, honey, I'm so sorry. And you can see on Piper's face that she's like sad, but she like tries to play it off. She's like, no, it's okay. It's no big deal. And Phoebe says, yes, it is. To you, it is. Is this what you wanted to talk to me about? I had no idea. And Piper's like, it's okay. I understand. She's like, no, it's not okay. I left the manor, not the family. I still want to be a part of your life, all of it. And they hug, and then Paige flies in as a bat, then morphs into herself and sits on top of a tombstone and says, aw, don't I get a hug? And Phoebe's like, Paige. And Piper's like, how did you find us? She says, we share the same blood, Piper, and hops down and says, I sniffed you out. She's like, Paige, listen to me. We'll go back to the manor and we'll find something to change you back. And she throws Piper across the place. And Phoebe holds up a cross, but Paige knocks it away and they start fighting. And Paige kicks Phoebe to the ground and is about to bite her when Leo orbs in and throws holy water on her. And Paige runs away, and Piper says, Paige, we are just trying to help you, damn it. And Paige says, catch me if you can, and turns into a bat and flies off, and then the three orb to follow her.
Such a baddie in the scene. But starting from the beginning, I joined this here, the kind of confusion from them, but obviously we know that Cole is the source warned them not to go after Phoebe. So that kind of like works for me here. But the whole conversation and sister moment between Piper and Phoebe is like really breaking my heart. And I like that Piper is trying to be very understanding about like, oh, don't worry, it's not a big deal. But Phoebe's like, no, I'm still a part of your life. Like I'm still in this family and I want to know everything that goes on with you. Like I think Piper really needed to hear that from her. And it was just a really cute moment between them.
Yeah, no, this is a really beautiful sister moment. I love the way that like the way everything shifts when it becomes about Piper, right? Because Phoebe very much did not want to be pregnant. So taking that pregnancy test for Phoebe was a very different experience than it was for Piper, seeing as they both got the negative results. I mean, we heard Phoebe saying a few episodes ago, like, she doesn't want kids for 10 years, right? Phoebe, I mean, we never know their ages in this show, but she's like 26 or 27, right? So she's thinking, like, when I'm in my 30s, I want a family, not right now. And
Hmm.
obviously, we know that Cole sabotaged her birth control, which is obviously also abusive. So, this wasn't something she wanted, right? This is something that if she is pregnant, it would be like bad news to her, right? Like maybe she'd accept it and decide to keep the baby. We don't know, but it's not the same as for Piper, who is actively trying to get pregnant, right? And then takes that test and it's negative. Like those are very different circumstances. And I think that the way they portray that and the way Phoebe instantly becomes like, no, like this is what you really want. This is a big deal for you. Like, is so supportive of Piper.
Yeah, I think the way it switches from like relief to disappointment for her sister is very very real and understandable, and it came across like perfectly the way the switch up happened.
Yeah, definitely. And then I think having Paige come in to interrupt is a really good way to bring us from like this kind of sad moment, right? Where like we see that there's a struggle in their relationship and their connection since Phoebe left home. And also a moment where like Piper is obviously going through something difficult. And then we switch that up to the comedy of Paige showing up, right? And then getting this big fight scene and Paige once again feeling left out from the family. And when she's possessed by evil, being able to just like call it for what it is and being like, don't I get to be part of the family moment? But she never feels like she does get to be part of the family moment.
Yeah, it brings out that subtle insecurity in Paige that we know she deep down has and probably has had all along. And being evil, she doesn't have to kind of hide that anymore, her thoughts.
Yeah, because as herself, right? Rather than dealing with her own hurt, that Piper isn't choosing to talk to her first about this, she had to kind of dig for the information. She's like, well, my sister is going through something and I need to help her. But when she's evil, it's like, you guys always fucking leave me out.
Right. But yeah,
I,
no, I agree. And then this whole fight scene between them, I think it happened really well. Leo coming in just in time, and then her with her final like "catch me if you can," and then disappearing into the night was like perfect to me.
yeah, I love it. I also love like all the like stereotypical vampire stuff, like Phoebe with the cross and then both wearing like the garlic on necklaces and like Leo coming in with the holy water real quick. Like it's just really tropey and I really like it.
So after this, we do the vampire cave, and three of them arrive and shine a flashlight to see a bunch of bats on the ceiling. And Leo says, "Well, which one's Paige?" Piper says, "How should I know?" Then the Queen, Paige, and Rowan walk over, candles lighting as they come, and the Queen says, "Welcome to our family." Kind of a small little scene, but I liked it there. Them, the little introduction with Paige, Rowan, and the Queen there, and the rest of them being like, what do we do now? We're just trapped in this cave with a bunch of bats.
So then we come back from commercial. We're still in the cave, and Piper's like, stay away from us, or you'll get an eye full of holy water and a chest full of wood. And the queen says, you'd only be delaying the inevitable. Now, why can't we just do this without a fight? And Phoebe says, Paige, we're your sisters. You're not a vampire yet. And the queen says, we're offering immortal life and eternity together as sisters. Now, isn't that preferable to death? And Piper says, are those our only two choices? because I prefer the scenario where you die and we get to stay human. And the queen says, if you could have killed me, you would have done so already. We both know that. Leo says, we got to get out of here. And Phoebe says, not without Paige. And Rowan says, words will never make them understand. And the queen says, no, but they will. And she nods, and the bats start flying towards them and attacking. And their crosses and holy water get knocked away, and Leo gets knocked out per usual. And Phoebe starts fighting Rowan, who is about to bite her, and Paige is about to bite Piper. And he gets distracted when the bats start setting on fire all over and blowing up. And Leo pushes Paige off Piper, and Phoebe stakes Rowan, and he like lights on fire and then blows up. And then the queen grabs Paige and says, come before the source kills us all. And Piper and Leo go to Phoebe and say they need to get Paige.
I do like this fight scene a lot here. I don't have anything like too much to say. It's more of just like an entertaining watch. I like the way, of course, they make it difficult at first, having everything get thrown away, swarmed around by the bats, and then obviously they start kind of taking care of each other because that's what they got to do.
Exactly. And I really like, the comedy of like Piper's attitude with the queen, all of that. I like the way that they choose to have like when Rowan gets staked, he sets on fire. I thought that was a really cool way of doing that, especially since obviously another show that was airing on the same network at the time was Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And like in that, like when the vampires get staked, they just turn to dust. So I like that they did something different to kind of differentiate themselves from obviously the most popular vampire show out at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Then we go to the queen's lair, and Cole flames in and knocks Paige out. Then the queen looks at him and she says, the source, I should have bitten you. And he's like, yeah, well, bite this. And he throws a fireball at her and she explodes. Then we cut to the other part of the cave where the sisters are. And they see all the bats start lighting on fire and realize that the queen must be dead. So they start calling for Paige now. And back in the queen's lair, Cole is standing over Paige with a fireball in his hand. And he hears the sisters calling for her. So he gets rid of it and says, in laws, and flames out. Then Phoebe, Piper, and Leo walk in as she wakes up. And Phoebe's like, thank God you're alive. And Leo's like, you all right? Paige says, the source. He was here. Piper says, just now? You saw him? And she shakes her head, and Leo's like, the queen must have posed a threat to him. Phoebe says, well, that would explain why he wanted to kill her, but why not Paige or us? And Piper says, I don't know. Let's just count our blessings and get the hell out of here. And then they go.
Count our blessings and get the hell out of here is hilarious. I love that.
Yeah, no, that's so funny. But yeah, I love that we have Cole come in here and like easily be able to kill the vampire queen. I don't know if that was like something the source could always do, then why they didn't just do that instead of banishing her last time, but whatever.
I think because they didn't know that killing the queen would like kill all of them, so they thought that like someone else would just take over and the problem would just continue.
Fair enough. I guess that makes sense.
Because like we even heard the other demon say earlier, like, oh, like vampires multiply so quickly, you'll never get rid of them all, right?
Right. It's a good point. And aside from that, I like that it was so easy for him to just kill her when it would have taken the power of three to do that instead. And it's just kind of perfect that, Paige gets knocked out just in time to not be able to see that the source is Cole. So we have another like near miss in that situation. And we don't know if Cole's gonna throw the fireball at her or not. And it's just like a really nice suspenseful moment that ends with them just all kind of getting out safely.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, everything worked here for me. I think this is a really well done scene. The acting's good, the pacing's good. I like the way things turn out. It all works for me. Aside from what you said, I don't really have anything to add there. So then we're at the manor in the conservatory in the morning. Piper comes down the stairs and goes to where Paige is sitting at the table and joins her and says, you're up early. Vampire nightmares? Paige says, oddly enough, no, just some other thoughts. She's like, any you want to share? Paige says, you wouldn't be interested. She says, try me. She says, they're about Cole. Piper says, I'm listening. She's like, okay. Remember the guy that stood me up? She's like, how could I? I never met him. She's like, yeah, you did actually. He was one of the vampires, and I first met him at the penthouse. He was there seeing Cole. Now, I know what you're going to say. Maybe Cole didn't know he was a vampire, and we should probably give him the benefit of the doubt. And you're right, we should. And Piper says, so then why do I get the sinking feeling that you might be onto something? She says, you do? Piper says, well, it's just a lot of little things, like him not wanting you to orb in, him not wanting us to, she says, save me. Piper says, go after vampires. I mean, I'm not saying that he's a demon, because we both know that that's not possible. Paige says, we both know anything is possible. She says, okay, but if we're wrong, then we lose Cole and Phoebe forever. She says, we're not wrong. Something is not right.
Ah, about time someone is finally listening to Paige. It's
Yes.
officially happening. I like that
I
it took like seeing him like not really care to save Paige to kind of start getting the feeling that something is going on.
Yeah, definitely. And I love the way she approaches this moment, right? And I like the way that, I mean, I don't like, but it's nice to see like the dynamic and the way Paige at this point is so used to questioning herself because everyone's been telling her she's crazy and like gaslighting her about thinking that Cole something's off for so many episodes now that she's like, I know, like we need to trust Cole, blah, blah, blah. And Piper's like, no, 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 not anymore. Like it's reached the breaking point for her. And she's open to hearing what Paige has to say. And even though there's that little bit of questioning at the end, ultimately she does believe Paige. But the major worry here is like, if we're wrong, it's not just Cole that we lose, it's Phoebe too.
And I like the way she says, like, we lose Cole. Like, she at this point still considers Cole a part of the family. And
Mm-hmm.
it's crazy because we see that the old Cole probably would have seen it this way too, like to the point where he was getting at, where he became a lot more closer to them. But now he's seeing them as just burdens, something in the way. Whereas Piper doesn't see it like that, and she doesn't want to lose, obviously not Phoebe, but she doesn't want to lose Cole either. So I think that was really cute that they had her say, "We lose Cole."
Definitely. And I think it goes back to what we saw earlier in the season, right? The sisters just went through a major familial loss, right? So the fact that Cole has become part of their family, like losing him would obviously be hardest on Phoebe, but would also affect Piper because she also has grown close to him over this season.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. So then back at Cole and Phoebe's apartment slash, at the manor in the kitchen because it's a phone call. The phone rings and Cole answers, and it's Paige, and he asks her how she's feeling. Paige says, human again, thank God. And he's like, yeah, thank God. And she asks to talk to Phoebe, but he says that she's sleeping, and Paige says that she'll just call back, and she turns to Piper. Obviously, the phone hangs up, and back at the apartment, Phoebe walks in and says, who is that? He's like, oh, nobody. How are you feeling? She says, better. And he says, good. And they sit across from each other. And Cole says, Phoebe, I'm never going to be okay with you chasing demons anymore. You can't change that. And she says, and you can't change the fact that they're going to keep coming after me. And I have sisters who need me. And he says, I understand. She says, do you? Because yesterday it seemed like you didn't. He says, I just don't want anything to happen to you ever. Is that so bad? And she says, no. And he gets up to leave for work and kisses her cheek and then goes. So then the phone rings and Phoebe answers, and it's the doctor with her test result. And she says, I'm what? And then faints. And we hear the doctor tell her that she's pregnant, and we see that she's passed out on the floor.
So the ending is actually really funny. I didn't write it in, but he's like, Miss Hallowell, Miss Hallowell, and she's just like laying on the ground.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. I think I don't know why she keeps passing out. A little weird to me, but maybe that's normal.
So it's something that I've seen happen in like other movies and TV shows where like someone's pregnant. I don't know what causes that in pregnancy. I think it's just that like some pregnant people become anemic because of like the way the pregnancy is affecting them, so it causes them to faint. But
Yeah,
I
that
don't
could probably be it with Phoebe. She did mention the possible anemia before anyways.
know. Hmm.
But aside from that, the whole him kind of lying to Paige and trying to separate them again as much as possible, not letting Phoebe know that Paige is on the phone and vice versa. Still, that abuser dynamic that we see, and the conversation between Cole and Phoebe where she's still defending it. Like, you have to understand that some things like this aren't going to change, and you just have to accept that. Him trying to say, well, make it sound like, well, I just don't want anything bad to happen to you. Is that so bad? And her kind of like, well, no, I guess when you put it like that, it doesn't sound so bad, but it's just the manipulation.
Exactly. It's that dynamic of like him convincing her that what she knows is true is not true, right? He's saying, like, no, it's not because of that. It's because I care about you, which again is
Right.
another abusive tactic.
Absolutely.
And also, I guess the one question I'm having here is like, how pregnant is Phoebe? Because, like, how long ago was the tonic supposed to have been? Because why would her pregnancy test be negative if it's been like several weeks since then?
I mean, I guess false negatives are possible, and it takes about 3 to 4 weeks to know for sure.
But I thought it had been like over a month. I guess that's why I'm questioning it.
It probably has been. I'm not exactly sure of the time frame. It doesn't really make sense at the end of the day, but again, just something they tend to do to us for plot's sake.
Yeah, I'll just accept it. Fine, whatever. So she's not pregnant enough for the pregnancy test to have been positive. Fine, I accept it. She got the blood test. We know. There we go.
Yeah, I guess. But yeah, now we know Phoebe is pregnant. The tonic did work, and who knows what's going to happen next. We've got Phoebe carrying his child, and the sisters finally against Cole, like agreeing on something being off with him. And I think we have some stuff to look forward to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've been kind of like thinking about it last episode that Phoebe might be pregnant. Now we have it confirmed. We'll see what happens as far as that goes and her reaction more. Next episode, we also obviously have now two sisters questioning Cole, so I wonder where that storyline will go on too. I wonder how long it'll be before it's revealed to them that Cole is evil and is the source. So I'm wondering how much longer we have until that happens. We do have at this point 4 episodes left of the season, so I'm thinking it's going to come up sometime pretty soon, but who knows how long the buildup will be. I like that this has been a more drawn out storyline because sometimes the show does move to plot lines really quickly. I like that they're taking their time with this reveal here.
Yeah, I mean, we vanquished the source like what, halfway through the season?
Yeah, so that was in episode 13 and this was episode 18, so
Yeah, we're getting pretty far along before this comes out. I like that they're kind of stretching it out throughout the season. And I'm definitely and having all these little subplots go on in that in between time. It's working really well for me.
I mean, overall, I think this is a really great episode. I have a feeling, unless the next 4 episodes are just the most amazing episodes over and knock it off my list, like, this is definitely going to be in my top 5 favorite episodes of the season. Like, I fucking loved this episode.
It was a really great episode. It might be in my top as well. I'd have to again go back and see like and think because I know we did have a lot of good ones this season, but I could see that there was a lot to enjoy here.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. If you want to reach out to us or follow us on social media, we're on Instagram and TikTok at rewitched_pod. Or you can send us an email to rewitched.pod@gmail.com. Either way, we appreciate you listening and hope you'll join us back next time for season 4, episode 19. We're off to see the wizard.